Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Darktide. So today I want to talk a little bit about tricks to keep you alive and the different ways to defend yourself in this game. And it's going to be a little bit different, I think, than some of the other videos that are out there on this topic. I'm going to be doing these in order of most important to sort of least important in a certain sense. So we're going to start off with the awareness that you have during the game, your sort of situational awareness. So this is your ability to figure out what's going on, what's on the map around you, and to figure out where everything is in relation to you. And this is all really, really important information to be able to sort of process and figure out on the fly while you're in the middle of a match. It's not something that I think you're going to be able to sort of learn, it's something that you're going to sort of pick up as you play the game. So I think that going over it too much in the tutorial is going to not necessarily help that much here, but there's a little clip of me in a pretty intense fight. There's a lot of stuff, it's close quarters, and you'll notice that there's a period of time where you hear that crackle and that snap of that trapper, and I just instinctively hop to the right, even though I don't know where it is and I can't see it. And the net flies past me, and this is where the benefits of that awareness sort of come in from. Your ability to listen to the sound cues to figure out where everything is, to realize that if I don't know where the trapper is, there's a decent chance that it's behind me, going after me rather than someone else. That's all very, very important information that you're going to need to figure out. And you'll notice that I also continue to use my situational awareness in this moment to try and get out of what looks like a really, really rough situation here. So this is one of those very broad concepts. You're going to hear calls for units. You're going to have to figure out what that means to you. You're going to then have to sort of guess or figure out where they are, and if you can't see them, where they could be coming at you from. And you're going to have to sort of figure out where everything else is in relation to you. Your allies, where the poxwalkers are, where the objective is. All of that information is stuff that you're going to have to keep track of in your head to figure out what you should be doing in a given moment on that basis. And it's going to become almost second nature instinctive if you play enough and know what you're doing. But if you're just sort of running in there, you don't hear the sound cues, you don't listen for that, you don't really pay attention to what's going on, you're going to have a really rough time keeping yourself alive, no matter how good you are at blocking, dashing, or anything like that. So the next topic I want to talk about is positioning, and this is a really difficult thing to explain as well, but it is a little bit easier than map sense and awareness and stuff like that. So if you're in a good spot on the map, it's actually not too hard for you to just endlessly defend yourself against a huge horde of regular enemies, and to be able to adequately defend yourself against specials if you're not pinned down for too long. Eventually a special could get around to you and kill you if you're there too long. But being in a good spot for the stuff that you're fighting up against is absolutely vital in this game. Getting caught out in the open against either a whole horde of shooters or against a massive wave of poxwalkers is a recipe for a quick and messy death in this game. So I'm going to show a couple of clips here. We've got one where I'm out in the open here a little bit. I've got the ability, however, to move it so that I've got my back up against a wall, and I've got a little bit of cover relative to the things. I've heard the sniper call. I know that there's one lurking around here somewhere. I don't see it. I don't know where it is, but I can't really deal with it even if I knew where it was, because I've got stuff barreling down at me in melee combat, stopping me from firing. So in this instance, all I can really do is keep an eye out on where that shot could be coming from, positioning myself so I've got cover relative to the sharpshooter, and I've got my back up against a wall so I'm not getting flanked by poxwalkers so that I can take them out easily in melee. If all of your enemies are forced into a narrow area in front of you, you can take out basically an unlimited amount of just basic melee dregs and all that other stuff mixed together. It's not too hard to do that, even if you're not blocking or dodging at all, when you've got yourself in a good position there. So I think that if you are in a situation where you're just like, oh, well, I couldn't fight my way out of that, it was absolutely nonsense, so there's no way I could have done anything about that, try thinking about your positioning. Like, why were you caught out in the middle of the open where everything was surrounding you and absolutely demolishing you from all sides? Now, this doesn't always mean you want your back into a corner. If you're up against, for example, a lot of shooters, it's very much more important that you have cover relative to them so that you can pop out and shoot a couple of them, but not take crippling amounts of firepower from them. And if you're up against a lot of specials, you need to have that ability to sort of dodge left or right against, say, a net or a hound or something like that. So know what's around you and position yourself relative to that in a way that's going to protect you against what's coming after you. The other scene that we got here is another sort of similar situation, just a little bit further on into the scene. Again, I'm moving in such a way that I've got my back up against a wall whenever I can against all these mobile units, moving towards that barrel so I can explode it and deal with a bunch of them that way. We're trying in this instance to just stay alive and not be overwhelmed by the massive hordes and numbers. You just got to keep a cool head and take those guys out in a relatively quick way. It doesn't really pay to sort of like chop your way through them one guy at a time. Whenever you can, you should try and get through them as fast as possible. Now, the other part of positioning that people are going to talk about is how you should stick with your team. And I don't necessarily think this is as good of information as people sort of mention it as. There are a lot of times and a lot of instances where I split off from the group, and that's on Damnation difficulty, and it works out just fine. The reality is that if you're a sharpshooter, you need to be in a good vantage point. If you've got zealots, they're usually going to be frontlining, and if you've got an Ogren, they can safely go out there, disrupt some stuff, and then use their ultimate to get back in. The Psyker should probably be sticking near you if you've got one, but there's a lot of instances where for one reason or another I want a different vantage point than would be useful for the rest of my team, so I'm going to go off. Okay, and the next most important part of defending yourself in Darktide, in my opinion here, and this one might be a little bit controversial, but I actually think that learning how to kill things is much more effective as a defensive measure in Darktide than trying to learn how to defend yourself. Anything that's dead is not going to actually kill you. Now, the thing about Darktide's combat system is that all of the enemies that you're going to be fighting have these really long, slow attack animations. So if you're up against something like, say, a Poxwalker, or even if you're up against a Gunner, you've got a decent wind-up period before they hit you. Just killing the enemy that's doing that is often a viable strategy if you're fast enough on the draw, if you're fast enough on the swing. And either situation, doing this makes it so that not only are they not attacking you now, but they're not going to attack you later. You could do as much blocking and dodging and zipping around the battlefield as you could want, but given that Darktide limits how many times you're allowed to do those actions, you're going to eventually get killed because the enemy is still there. By contrast, just killing them means that not only are they not attacking you, you've interrupted their attack because you probably staggered them or you killed them, but you're not going to have to deal with all the future attacks that they throw at you after that. There's a lot of situations where if I have to choose between just getting rid of somebody or taking a hit to my toughness, I'll just take the hit to the toughness and then get rid of that guy. It's much, much more efficient, it's much faster, it helps my team more because that enemy is no longer a threat to them as well, and honestly speaking, I think it's just something that you should learn to appreciate is that those big, slow attacks that a lot of those enemies have gives you lots of time to just hit them. They'll be staggered, so they're not going to attack you anyway, and then you'll kill all of them much, much, much faster than if you were trying to do all that fancy blocking and dodging and stuff like that. So you can see here that I am still doing a lot of that blocking and dodging, but a lot of what I'm trying to do here is just swing, swing, swing whenever I get a chance to. And this is just a really hectic sort of situation, a really hectic kind of fight against these Poxwalkers and these Scabs, but you're capable of making it a much more manageable fight by quickly killing them all, rather than trying to do anything fancy. So definitely learn to be aggressive in your playstyle against these guys. Not necessarily in rushing forward against them, but in not just standing in a corner holding down the right button. You're trying to get rid of the enemy. That's ultimately your goal, not trying to stand there and defend yourself. I think there's been people who have thought that like the veteran sharpshooter is really not supposed to be doing any of that stuff, but if you can't rely on your team doing that, then you really have to step up to the plate and do it yourself. So I think that this is one of the more important things to think about, but also one of the easier to execute things once you sort of get in that mindset of being aggressive, taking swings at the enemy. And this leaves us with our last little piece of advice here, and that is your blocking, dodging, and pushing. So this is all stuff that I'm not going to elaborate on too much. This is stuff that you've seen in Psychanium. You should just do the tutorial. It does a good job of teaching the basics of it. But I will tell you a few things that aren't actually well elaborated on in the Psychanium. So the first thing is that your block is actually a 360-degree arc. So if you hear that whoosh, always click right-click. You're going to be able to block that attack that's coming in from somewhere that you can't see, and you'll be able to sort of then swing back at whoever was doing that to you. Very, very effective to learn how to recognize that sound to the point where you can practically play the game like blindfolded if you're in the lead, based entirely off the sound cues. And it's just a really useful sort of skill to have as far as that goes. And the same sort of thing goes with your dodge. Just because you can't see the attack doesn't mean you can't dodge the attack, and this is really important when you're dealing with things like trappers and the like. Now, what the game doesn't do a great job of teaching you is how effectively you want to weave all of these together. Because you're never just defending yourself with one element of this. You're sort of going through all three of these things at the same time, or sort of in sequence, or put together in a sort of very deadly ballet as you sort of move across the battlefield there. And this is because you've got limited uses of each of these, but if you're sort of dodging between blocks, it gives you that ability to regain your stamina a little bit. While you're swinging at the enemy, you can regain some stamina. If you're blocking, you can regain your dodge uses. And sort of going back and forth and using all of these tools at your disposal rather than sort of relying on any one makes it much more effective. If you're able to sort of dodge and attack while also pushing another group with a block push, that's a fantastic way to get yourself into a position where you've got the space and time to swing at the enemy and stuff like that. You can see in the clip that we're using here that I'm kind of using all of these different techniques at the same time. I've gotten myself into a situation where there's a big horde in front of me. I'm using my dodges, I'm using my pushes, but I'm using that in service of repositioning myself to a better location because I know that we're going to be in for a bit of a rough ride. I know that my team is having trouble, and I know that there's trappers around, so I need to get to a better position than where I am at. And sort of weaving together all of the different defensive elements that there are to this game. Now, I do also want to add, the clips I've got here are from the hardest difficulty. The techniques here are kind of unnecessary to a certain extent when you're on the lowest difficulty. It's just a very different game in both cases. And I think that people who go from that malice difficulty to that damnation difficulty are really hitting a brick wall because they're sort of experiencing that they can't survive on mechanics alone anymore. And their ability to sort of find themselves in a good position and be able to survive by keeping those good positions is much more important, in my opinion, than your technical ability to block or parry or to dodge or anything like that. So now if you are extremely good at all of those things, then yeah, you'll probably be fine at that highest level of difficulty. But I'm not good at any of those things, and I can do those missions just fine, purely based on not getting myself in trouble, where I would need to use those skills at their highest peak performance. So I think that that's sort of how I view defense and staying alive in Darktide. If you've got any other tips, leave it in the comments below, but that's going to be our video for today. So I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.